Before we get started, there's something I have to share with you, beautiful people. If you're listening, you probably do like your cinema from all across the globe, and I think I've got something that's going to be right up your alley. There's this new streaming service. It's called Film Movement Plus, and it opens up a world of award-winning entertainment, including some of the best films from around the globe, and that is the truth. Among the hundreds of titles that there are waiting for your discovery, and there are hundreds of titles, it's really a rich and fantastic service. There's some of the best stuff from 2020 as well, stuff like Wild Goose Lake, which we cannot recommend enough, and things like Zombie Child, which played festivals, and there's so much more, and there's a lot of really great stuff. You can find the app for it on your Roku, on your Apple TV, or on your Amazon Fire, not to mention on your laptop, desktop, as well as any sort of mobile devices. And Film Movement Plus is a measly $5.99 a month. It is a great deal, but as a listener of our podcast, and we got a treat for you. If you sign up today for Film Movement Plus, we're going to give you a 30-day free trial, plus the next 3 months at 50% off when you use the promo code SEATS. That is a fantastic, fantastic deal. If you love foreign cinema, I cannot recommend that enough. Sign up today at filmmovementplus.com or follow the link that we have provided on the podcast or on the YouTube link below to click through and get watching today.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
That beat just keeps going on and on and on, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. Because that's how we like to do it. And, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast, and I certainly hope that you would because you're listening right now, you can do that over at Spotify, at Apple, Amazon, Google, basically anywhere you find your podcasts. And also, every single one of our episodes is archived over at our YouTube channel. Also, we'd really love it if you'd follow us on social media. You can do that over at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And finally, and most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest movie news and reviews. And some television too, because we like talking about the moving image. So basically anything we can get our hands on is a good thing to talk about and recommend to you, and as we all go forward in our viewing adventures in this world. On this episode, we got a fun one. We are talking with a composer. Kate Simko. She's a composer, she's an artist, she does scores, and she was directly involved in the documentary, which is now on Crave and coming to VOD soon, called Underplayed, about female voices in the electronic and techno music world. It's a great doc, definitely one you should check out. And we talked with Kate just about sort of being involved in a story like this, which she has some very similar roots to, the art of composing, and so very much more. And it was a fun talk, so I hope you enjoy it, because I know I did. Well, I guess my first question is because, in watching the movie and then doing a little bit of research about your life, it almost feels like your life is the prequel to this film in a bit of a way. And I'm kind of curious, walk me through how you ultimately got involved with the film.
So you're going to even feel like this more. So basically, when I was in Chicago, I was an assistant at a music studio, a small studio called Mosaic Music, for a composer. And there was a music supervisor named Gabe McDonough. We come by the studio, and I was the assistant who ordered the food for lunch and made, coffee and everything. Right. And he knew that I was, a DJ and doing electronic music and composer. And he would always tell me, the projects I'm working on in Chicago aren't that cutting edge for advertising, but I'm always going to keep you in mind. And this was like 2006. And we always kept in touch. I sent him my London Electronic Orchestra album when that came out in 2016. That was the last email I had sent out to him.
Mm.
And we hadn't spoke since then. And then he contacted me in 2019 and said, all right, I got it. I told you. He's like, I told you I was going to get it. I was going to find, I was waiting for the opportunity, to have a cool project that needed electronic music. This is it. This is totally perfect for you. Like, yeah, that's how it happened.
Like, just in watching the film, I mean, I knew a little bit about electronic music, but not obviously that much, especially when it comes to sort of the down at like the pure DJing of it and sort of playing the festivals and that kind of thing. How important is it to sort of, and I mean, and not just from a, I mean, from a representation side, obviously that's one thing, but it feels important to have this film just to showcase some of the really amazing work that a lot of these women are doing.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I was keen and excited to get on board no matter what, but I was so happy and almost relieved, I would say, that Stacy took the angle that you're saying, that, it's about just showing women doing their thing more than anything. I think she really focused on how hard they are working and how incredible they are, how talented they are, how unique they are. Yeah, so yeah, I was inspired. I didn't know a number of these artists either, if I'm honest with you. It's a little bit different niche than mine. I'm a little bit more underground, or like artistic electronic,
Right.
like, classically trained, da da da, I have my orchestral electronic ensemble, so I'm not like super EDM, I'm not
Yeah, no, neither am
commercial.
I, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's more commercial, but getting inside it, I do have a lot of respect for these artists, and they believe in what they're doing. I mean, they are passionate about their music, and yeah, I liked it. I think it's good.
Is it a bit of a trip to be an electronic artist doing a score about electronic artists? It almost feels like it's almost a little too meta.
Yeah, I mean, didn't end up being that close to home though, because in my scene, which is more, I'm from Chicago, so,
Right.
not far away from you. And so I grew up, in Chicago house. And, when I was started buying records and stuff in like 98, 99, 2000, there were literally 3 female house DJs in Chicago. And I mean, like, that's, that was the capital of house music. And they were in a collective called Super Jane, right?
Right.
And so there's the 3 of them, and they were the only ones. And then I was like, of like 2 or 3 in the next generation out of like dozens and dozens of guys, so in that scene, I know a lot of people, and when they first approached me, I really recognized and either have had experiences with the other women that were on this house and techno sort of scene, not commercial. I was like, that would have been really close to home. Maybe, a couple of those names. But yeah, it just ended up being like, more EDM and electronic. And it felt really good though. It felt like they were treated as, I've seen a huge shift over the past 20 years where it felt like they were treated in the same way that a pop artist would be treated, or a rock and roll band, you know, where it used to be like electronic music wasn't even music. People would say that, it wasn't real music. So in that sense,
Sure. No,
I was,
it always fascinates me though, because I mean, at least from a music fandom standpoint, I think I've come at it first from sort of the hip hop angle and sort of the work that
mm,
guys out of like California were doing, like Shadow and Qbert and guys like
mm,
that. And then
yeah,
I never understood, like I knew of techno and I knew of house, but it all seemed like this big sort of evolution to sort of having it peak. I don't want to say now, but I mean maybe in the last 10, 15 years, it feels like it's been a bit more of a thing than maybe it was previously.
yeah, yeah. Do you think electronic music's bigger now than it used to be previously? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I
Oh
mean,
yeah, definitely. Definitely. For sure. And I mean, I started touring internationally in 2007,
okay.
really, and then I was quite a bit. And I will tell you for sure, in 2007 to 2010, around then, if you went into a cool clothing store anywhere in Europe or the UK, it was electronic music in the
Yeah.
store, right? That was like, that's what they targeted young people. That was the soundtrack of 20 somethings, right? In the States, then when I was, first coming up as a DJ, it was rock music. There was a genuine divide, between like what European 20 somethings, what was like the soundtrack for them and what was the soundtrack in the United States. And then I moved to London in 2012. It started shifting. So already, by 2010-ish, 2011, and then it started shifting, and it really started to be like crossing over into the mainstream from the underground raves and stuff. And then, and then when I moved in 2012, that's when EDM blew up. And I only know that because when I left, it was on the cusp with like Dead Mouse and Skrillex, if you know these kind of names. And I just heard them and of their names, and it was like, whatever, it was like a totally different scene. And then by the time I'd graduated in July 2014, I mean, it was like, that was massive. I mean, they were pop stars, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean, it's all, so it has really changed. I mean, it has become so much bigger, and it's, it's gone from going to Coachella and having a dance tent that was in the back of Coachella, sequestered on its own in the corner, right? For like 1,000 people, to electronic artists headlining the main stage in the past 15 years, really, So yeah, it's kind of come into its own. But I think this film is like catching up on like, okay, amazing, like electronic music is moving into the mainstream. Let's talk about the 5% of women that are a part of it. I guess,
No, for sure.
Like there's a big money to be had, and there's like, this is like a big deal now, and like, why are 95% of the people like a certain gender, right?
No, it's absolutely right. But I mean, at the same time, it really does also show sort of the potential outside of the quote unquote dance tent. And I'm kind of curious, how did you sort of transition into film scoring? Because again, in the past few years, like people would think of, film scoring and be like, oh, it's John Williams or it's somebody like that. But really it has evolved into this very sort of different landscape where people are making some really fascinating music.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I did a panel last night, and they sort of asked me and a couple of film composers, but for me, I always wanted to score films. So I did my undergrad. Yeah, I did my undergrad at Northwestern in Chicago. And I mean, as soon as I found out, because I studied music technology, it was the name of the master's, or sorry, the major. And we had the ARP 2600 and Moog modulars. I know you said you're not a huge fan of electronic music, but just to say, not just the computers. This was one of the original university facilities that was funded by the United States government in the 60s and 70s. So there's Columbia, Princeton, Stanford, Northwestern, and like one or two others, or I don't know, less than 10, where they, the government actually said, we are going to give you money to research electronic music, right? And have students and PhDs, everything, like doing research on this, right? So, that's where I studied a lot at this conservatory at Northwestern. And because I wanted to, but I was coming from like a house background. I wanted to learn how to make electronic music, and it just happened that I was there. And then as soon as I found out that you could put videos into the software, I was like, oh my God, like, hello, And so then, and they didn't teach film scoring. So for my graduation project, you had, sort of like your final senior year graduation, you're able to, speak to your advisor and have your independent final project. And that's where I scored my first film. My project was to teach myself Pro Tools and how to score a film. And I scored a student film that I have on VHS there in the closet. And that's how I got started. So yeah. And then I moved to LA, and I had the dream of scoring films. And I'm just like the total cliche. I moved to LA, interned, like ran out of money, and that's how that went. So then I started DJing because that's where I could make money. I was offered DJ gigs. I was offered electronic albums and record deals. And so I did my work in music where I could develop my musical voice, and I had a lot of fun, but I always wanted to score film. So finally I was like, okay, like, when I was 30, I was like, all right, I better get back to this. And that's when I got my master's in composition for screen to like get back to it. Yeah.
Now, I'm kind of curious from your perspective, where I mean, this might be a loaded question, but I mean, I'm kind of curious to hear your take on it. I'm like, where do you think sort of electronic music was born? Because I mean, I look at something like the
Yeah.
theremin and the way Clara played it. That almost seems like it was the birth of that in many
Mm.
ways. I'm just curious your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think the theremin, and as soon as sound could be recorded and people started using tape splicing of sounds and layering them, so Stockhausen. And so,
Yeah,
really it was in the university. That's where they had the technology. And so it was, it was theremin, but it was also, the first original synthesizers and coming from the 1960s. And then in pop and stuff, then, people will have different ideas, but Kraftwerk or, different pioneering artists from Detroit or from the States as well. But yeah, it was really that's why there was money given, for research, because it was all brand new. I mean, it
mm,
was, it was a genuine transition from hearing music performed by people live, right, to having recorded music. And then it was like that was the start of it, where the recording technology that inspired people to be like, wow, okay, we can record sound, we can record music, right? Yeah.
now, can you talk to me a little bit about just the electronic music orchestra? Because I will shamefully admit I did not even know that was a thing.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's my thing. I mean, so basically when I was at the Royal College of Music and I moved to London, I had in my head that, if when I arrived, to the Royal College of Music, that they did not support or just thought that, that's not what I was there to do, that I would totally respect that, because I wanted to learn how to orchestrate. You mentioned John Williams. I love a lot of orchestral scores. I also love electronic scores. I love Blade Runner. I love Carter Burwell, if you know him. I love Clint Martinez, who did Drive,
Oh, yeah,
soundtracks like that.
love him. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's amazing. So, I love both, but I was like, I already knew how to produce electronic music, and I moved to London to make orchestral music, to learn how to write for orchestra. That's why that was my mission. So, in my first sort of one-to-one tutorials with my professor, I was like, okay, yeah, right. Like I don't know how to write for orchestra, but I'm going to do it. And then he would really encourage me. He's like, you already have a musical voice. You're different than some of the students who just finished their undergrad and roll straight on into their masters and they don't have a sound yet. He's like, you have a sound. Don't lose your sound. Just add the orchestral instruments that you're learning to write for into your own sound, right?
Yeah.
It's just like an extension of your palette of sound that you have what you're used to, plus an orchestra, put it all together. Like, not a big deal, basically. Like, you don't have to come up with you don't have to have like an orchestral sound and an electronic sound. Like, just be yourself, basically. So I spent 2 years recording so many instruments and figuring out how I could use them instead of synthesizers, learning the ranges and the timbres of the orchestral instruments, to a point that I could be like, okay, cool. Instead of using like an arpeggiated synth, I'll record a harp here. And I want to have a low, I'll replace this low synth with some saxophone, or, like baritone sax or something. And then I'm getting to the end of the story, I promise. There was a big concert in the graduate. So like once a year, at the end of the year at Royal College of Music, they have a beautiful opera theater, and students can submit a proposal to have their own concert. And it's literally like one concert a year. So I went my first year to the concert and I was like, I definitely want to do that next year. I want to be that person. That looked awesome. So I submitted my proposal to have the first London Electronic Orchestra concert. I was like, I'm going to have a concert. I will get lots of students involved. Give me an orchestra. I'm going to do orchestra, electronics, visuals. Like, it's going to be amazing. Typed out my little proposal and I got it. And that's how I had my first show. And then I just thought that was going to be like my hurrah, like, graduating. That's really sad. I don't have my visa anymore. I'm going to move back to Chicago. End of days, London. But there is a manager from London in the audience who was there. The concert sold out. So that was 400 people,
Mm.
from the electronic music scene in London as well as classical. And they said that they've never had a student concert sell out at the college and ever, 400. So it was a big deal. And from there, the manager got me on board and we got booked at festivals and we got an album deal. And that's how London Electronic Orchestra happened.
Well, that I love, because I mean there is such a common misconception, and I think the film shows this really effectively as well, that performing electronic music live is, something as simple as, plugging in a flash drive and pressing go, and it's not that
Yeah.
at all.
Mm,
And I'm kind of
yeah.
curious, especially when you're working on a film, like, are you constantly working on material, or do you have to go in blind, or are there even sessions where you may be working with other artists trying to record something, especially when you're scoring?
Um, can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
No, no problem. It just in terms
Yeah.
of when you're working on a musical score, like, is it just you in a lab sort of composing and working, or are there other musicians around,
Mm,
or do you
right.
come to a project with stuff already done?
Okay. So in my case, I pretty much do everything. And I think part of that, to be honest with you, is being from Chicago. Chicago is just a city where people don't even have managers, even if they're big DJs, and everybody just does their own stuff. It's just such a purist place, So
Yeah,
before moving to London in 2012, I mean, it's just now I'm just like, wow, I could have made so much more music. But I wrote everything myself, produced it myself, mixed it myself, just did everything myself, to the 100%, and then sent it out for mastering into the record label every time. And in London, you know, I don't know. Like I said, I wanted to learn how to orchestrate, and that was a big thing to me. So I just never, and I know other composers that hire other people to orchestrate, but then they're writing a part of your music. I think that, the orchestral colors and the way that you blend different instruments together. Well, I mean, I know it changes completely the experience, right? And there's so much creativity, especially in a live setting when you're thinking about panning and you think, okay, the bass players can play this, right? And then
right.
that on the other side, you have this part of the orchestra and they can do this, and you can have all these creative ideas, and so I just from the beginning was like, okay, I am awful at this, but I'm going to learn how to do it. And I just always, so I do it all myself. I do the electronic production, I do the orchestral writing, arranging. But now I send off. I've done it at the college and stuff, but I send off usually now orchestral parts to be mixed separately. Actually, Philip Glass's sound engineer is an old friend of mine from raves since we were 16 in Chicago, and he mixes my orchestral stuff. I mean, and it takes him 2 to 3 weeks to mix the album. That means it would probably take me 2 to 3 months,
Right.
like, but I write the music. He helps mix it though. Yeah. Besides that, I do everything else. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, it speaks to sort of the creative freedom that electronic music can allow an artist to have. And I mean, just to put a bow on this, because I don't want to keep you too much longer.
No, no,
Uh,
it's okay.
how do you think the film sort of promotes not just women in the business and women in electronic music, but just sort of electronic music in general? Because I mean, in reality, this isn't a genre where you necessarily need a band. You just need the gear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, and I don't, I don't know. I genuinely don't know if electronic music needs to be promoted anymore or how much, if this was made even 10 years ago, I would have said amazing, let's give some respect to this music, and some understanding that, like you just said, it's not just pushing a button, and there's so much that goes into it. But yeah, I think the film, of course, is more about women, but it also does show how you can be extremely independent. I'm thinking of Rez, if you remember Rez from
Yeah.
Toronto, and I think she gave the best window into that, just, showing where she locked herself in the basement for a couple of years and, was able to produce an entire album that changed her life and changed the course of her life by herself in the basement, her parents' basement, right?
Yeah,
So that is liberating. You don't have to worry about the drummer quitting the band and getting in a fight and you break up. I mean, you
exactly.
can do it yourself. Yeah.
All right, last one, and it's a silly one because I mean I'm a movie
Sure.
guy. This is a movie show. If you had a dream, okay, if you had like a dream scoring job, what would it be?
Well, I mean, I really want to score Hollywood films, so my dream is to collaborate with, up and coming directors. I mean, I think about in the past who that would have been, like Francis Ford Coppola,
Yeah,
or I would say like in a way I was, inspired by Sofia Coppola, being a female director, but she just licenses so much music. I don't know if you know that about her, but
yeah,
she takes
yeah.
existing songs and it doesn't really have a score. So yeah, my dream would be to team up with someone who's sort of in the same position as me, in the sense that they haven't found their scoring partner yet. Like, how there's certain directors that have a composer that scores for them every single time.
Yeah.
I would love to just like somehow pair up with somebody who's amazing and just like be a team where we just get along really well and they're just, super forward thinking and making films that are creative and inspiring. And yeah, I don't know, that people that are like iconic films. I mean, that's the dream. That's the dream, Dave.
Well, I think someone will find you because I mean your music on this film was great, and I mean we even mentioned Cliff Martinez before. I mean that almost feels like a door that's been opened for other artists to come in and sort of be paired up with filmmakers and make these really unique pieces of art. And I hope you get that chance. And
Oh, thank you.
thank you for the time. This was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.